Close your eyes and picture Bigfoot. You're probably seeing a lumbering ape-like giant. But what if that image is all wrong? Forget the cartoonish monster of campfire stories. We're going to shatter the stereotypes and delve into the eyewitness accounts that paint a far more complex and unsettling picture of the creature known as Bigfoot. Be prepared to leave your preconceptions behind.
Number 10. The Logging Company. In 1958, Jerry Crew, a logging company bulldozer operator in Humboldt County, California, discovered a set of large 16-inch human-like footprints sunk deep within the mud in the Six Rivers National Forest. Upon informing his coworkers, many claimed to have seen similar tracks on previous job sites, as well as telling of odd incidents such as an oil drum weighing 450 pounds having been moved without explanation. Soon began to utilize the term Bigfoot to describe the mysterious culprit. Jerry, who initially believed someone was playing a prank on them, once again observed more of these numerous massive footprints and contacted a reporter. A plaster cast was made of the footprints, and Jerry appeared holding one of the casts on the front page of a newspaper on October 6, 1958. With multiple people experiencing the same thing, it makes me question how it could not be real. Number 9. One of the earliest sightings in Florida. In 1975 in Florida, Collier County, a family found some Bigfoot footprints. A family went hunting out on a boys' trip, and the man retelling the story was 13 years old at the time. He said, "My family drove out to a secluded area of the Everglades, way out in the middle of nowhere. We tracked through waist-high vegetation growth, and when we reached a clearing and continued in a horizontal line towards a tree line approximately 100 yards away. We supposedly were hunting for rabbits, but never saw one. As we approached the tree line, we came upon a recently dried out water hole. Here is where I spotted the tracks. They were at least 17 inches in length, 2 half prints and 1 full print in the mud going into the brush line. The brush on the other side was thrashed. I recall that we left the area not longer after it, and it basically ended our trip. I feel like with what I know now, it was a skunk ape. I swear on the Bible on this experience. I clearly remember no sign of animal activity to include land or air. No birds. Weird for 7 p.m. aka dusk in the Everglades. 6 of us saw it, but at the time none of us said anything. I remember it was 1975, only 8 years after the Patterson film. Number 8. California State. In the United States, California is the state with the most reported Bigfoot sightings. So far, there have been 461 reported sightings. This is a real story from January 2022. A family was hiking in Humboldt County on a local trail in Red Crest. They hiked this trail for 19 years and do it 3 to 4 times a week, and they always go as a family. Their story goes, in the summer we hiked the trail nearly every day. We've never ever gotten the creeps in those woods. The last 2 hikes have really changed that. We were nearly done. On our way out when a loud, and I'm talking loud, yell, scream, guttural screech echoed through the woods. My family and I have grown up in redwoods. We've heard everything that nature has to offer in the way of animal sounds, but it wasn't a raven, a fox, a bear, a lion, a deer bleat, a chipmunk, or a hawk. It sounded somewhat like a human, but the fact that it traveled through the woods so clearly and loud really shook all of us. Today, the sound was nothing we've ever heard before. It was loud and defined. It was just far enough in the distance for whatever it was to get its point across without making us petrified. It stopped my mother, me, and my son in our tracks. There was no doubt that we all heard the same thing. We got the feeling that we were being watched, and that feeling didn't go away until we started driving off. Number 7. Bigfoot Body. 2 men, Matt Witten and Rick Dyer, claimed to have stumbled across a Bigfoot corpse in the woods northern of Georgia, and they stood by their story at a news conference in Palo Alto, during which they offered an email from an entomologist as evidence and said they have kept the body in a freezer for more than a month. Everyone who was talked down to us is going to eat their words, said Matt, an officer on medical leave from the Clayton County Police Department. Matt and Rick, a former corrections officer, announced the discovery on YouTube and their website. Although they didn't consider themselves devoted Bigfoot trackers before then, they have since started offering weekend search expeditions in Georgia for $499. The specimen they bagged, the men say, was one of several ape-like creatures they spotted cavorting the woods. Was it real or just a cash grab? Who knows, but finding the body of Bigfoot? Wow. Number 6. The footprint. In Logan, Utah, Matthew Wentz came across a large footprint he thinks could have been made by a Sasquatch in the Bear River Range. He didn't see the creature, only found the print, but he took a photo of it. Matthew, who is 6'3", explained that a mountain lion track is not much bigger than his palm, the black bear tracks he had seen are not any bigger than his hand, so that eliminates some comments of people saying it was possibly from a bear. He said, "I wear size 12 shoe, and in comparison to that, there is no bear that would make a print that big. I've looked up bear tracks, and even the largest grizzly bear, this track is bigger. That track is in the 15 to 16 inch range, which is pretty big. If you take a shoe size, it would be bigger than a size 20. The width was 6 to 7 inches. I really believe there is some tall being out there, but I have no idea what it is. It's hard to believe they would be around here because there are so many people and more going into the mountains these days compared to 30 or 40 years ago. People used to see stuff all the time." He also said, "I have multiple friends that are older than me that have seen stuff around here. They're credible, but they don't talk about it. You know, when someone has seen something and it scares them, they don't really want to talk about it or be ridiculed." Number 5. Hitchhiking? To this day, there are still sightings in Florida, and in 2021, as a commuter was driving down US 1, they were driving south just after sunset, and there was one on the road beside him and another truck. While driving, he noticed something very large walking on the west side of US 1, walking north, approaching him. His best description of what he saw was a huge football player in shoulder padding, 6 to 7 feet tall, wearing a long, shaggy fur coat. This happened in the summertime in Florida, so no human would dare wear one, it would be too hot. He said, "I slowed down as I became level with what I saw, and it had the head of an ape with a bump on its head. The fur was long and looked white, kind of like a dirty white shag carpet. As he drove past, the beast did not turn to look at him, but kept looking straight ahead. It was out in the open, and he thinks the other truck saw it too due to their driving actions, but that is just insane." Number 4. The Professor. Dr. Jeffrey Meldrum is a professor of autonomy and anthropology. He teaches at Idaho State University, and his lab houses over 300 footprint casts from a mysterious North American primate. He said, "Historical evidence for the existence of Bigfoot takes the form of Native American accounts of a wild man in the woods. Depictions are remarkably similar across tribes considering the differing regional circumstances and interpretations. As European settlers pressed westward into the wilderness, they too reported encounters with wild men, buggers, giant hairy apes, mountain devils, etc. As a student of human bipedalism, our adaptations for walking on 2 feet, the best contemporary evidence are footprints that corroborate these stories of wild men. Something is leaving oversized human-like footprints. They are either hoaxed, misidentified, or the trace of a real species. The distinctive anatomy, documented consistently over the past 70 years, is compelling evidence of the latter." Number 3. Indigenous Cultures. Many of the indigenous cultures across North America and continent include tales of mysterious hair-covered creatures living in forests and legends that existed long before contemporary reports of Bigfoot. On the Tule River Indian Reservation in Central California, they believe in a group of Bigfoot called the Family. They called the largest of them hairy men, and they are estimated to be between 500 and 1,000 years old. Other tribes tell stories about Sasquatch, a shape-shifting creature that protects the forest. The name Sasquatch is the anglicized version of Sasquatch, roughly translating to hairy man. Other tales from different tribes describe them as a nocturnal race, and children were warned against saying the name so the monsters would not come and carry them off in the night. In 1847, natives talked about skookums, a race of human-eating wild men living on the peak of Mount St. Helens in southern Washington state. Also related to this area was an alleged incident in 1924 in which a violent encounter between a group of gold prospectors and a group of ape men occurred. These allegations were reported in July 16, 1924. This has become a popular piece of Bigfoot lore, with the area now being referred to as Ape Canyon. Number 2. The Reddit Bigfoot Hunter. One Reddit user posted on the Ask Me Anything subreddit. They claim to have had countless interactions with Bigfoot and have done a lot of research. They list important things being: number 1. The most common misconception about Bigfoot is that there's only one of them. I and a vast majority of Bigfoot enthusiasts scientists believe there exists self-perpetuating species of the bipedal ape residing in North America. Cousin species are likely the abominable snowman, yeti, and yowie, among others. Number 2. As recently as 300,000 years ago, there exists skeletal evidence of a species of a massive ape called Gigantopithecus blackie.
Gigantopithecus.
A massive ape called Gigantopithecus blackie. Many Bigfoot enthusiasts believe these are ancestors of modern big feet. Number 3. There is an average of 400 reported sightings each year. Based on these reports, big feet can be characterized as follows. Walk upright, up to 8 feet tall, covered in black, brown, red fur all over their bodies except for the face, palms, and soles, secrete a foul smell, nocturnal behavior, omnivorous diet, marked intelligence and senses of smell, vision, and hearing, extremely cautious behavior around humans. The most numerous examples of physical evidence are footprint casings. The stride length heel to heel between prints is usually 4 to 5 feet, and the depth of the prints denotes the specimen weighing 600 to 700 pounds. Number 1. The President Believed. US President Theodore Roosevelt, in his 1893 book, The Wilderness Hunter, writes a story he was told by an elderly mountain man named Bowman, in which a foul-smelling, bipedal creature ransacked his beaver trapping camp, stalked him, and later became hostile when it fatally broke his companion's neck in the wilderness near the Idaho-Montana border. Roosevelt notes that Bowman appeared fearful while telling the story, but attributed the trapper's folkloric German ancestry to have potentially influenced him, but it seems like he believed him. A president believing in something like this? That's unheard of. It has to be true then.
Coming in at number 10, we have the Marble Mountain Bigfoot. This is one of the most famous Bigfoot videos of all time. It was taken when a team of Bigfoot hunters went in search for the mysterious beast, and they might have got what they were looking for. Let's have a look at this clip.
See the patch of snow in the middle there? There's 3 patches of snow up there. See the one right up, straight up above the patch of snow.
Right under that big wall.
I mean, shaky camera footage and Bigfoot go together like peanut butter and jelly. You know, there's even a rumor that Bigfoot has the ability to distort cameras, and that's why no one has been able to get a good shot of him. But looking at this footage, it's very hard to tell what we are looking at. That could be a guy walking around on his own enjoying the wilderness, but at the same time, he is so far out in the bush. It would be very strange for someone to be that deep into the woods without any supplies, because it's very clear in this video that they have no sort of backpack or survival bag, and no survivalist would leave their supplies just lying around while they're scoping out the area. Maybe this was a Sasquatch just hanging out on his own. Coming in at number 9, we have the Sasquatch Genome Project. I don't know if you guys have ever heard of the Sasquatch Genome Project, but it's a group of dudes who want nothing more than to find Bigfoot and study him. And honestly, they all look like cool dudes. They were on the news in Texas, and all of them have like mullets and ponytails. I bet beyond tips on how to find Sasquatch, they can also give you great tips on what products to use in your hair. But all jokes aside, these guys probably have the best footage of Bigfoot ever. Here's some of the clips that were able to work their way onto the local news. Use clip 2.
Seen short video clips of the legendary and very shy creature. The group spent 5 years and $500,000 coming to this conclusion. One clip is of...
I mean, those all look pretty convincing. We just need to find a way to get a clear shot of this guy. Also, it's great to know that there's a group of people out there that you can join right now that can help you in your efforts to find Bigfoot. When I was a little kid and people asked me what I wanted to be when I grew up, a Bigfoot hunter was never an option. Coming in at number 8, we have Sasquatch in Virginia. Take me home, country roads is what this big old Sasquatch was thinking when he came out and was spotted by these 2 dudes. This next clip was from a news station in Virginia. The footage was taken by a father and son on a camping trip. Honestly, that is the most wholesome way you could ever run into Bigfoot. You and your dad are like, look, it's a Bigfoot. I can't believe we're seeing this together right now, but let's get out of here before this thing kills us.
All right. And this was shot apparently near the Intracoastal Waterway earlier this month.
I don't see why these guys would lie about something like this, but they did say that the same thing happened to them 25 years ago. Which makes me think that either these guys are the 2 luckiest dudes in the world, or they're faking it. Seeing Bigfoot twice in one lifetime is like getting hit by lightning 23 times. Coming in at number 7, we have He's Still Around. If any of you had thought that Sasquatch had moved on to bigger and better things, or that if he was real, he had probably gone extinct by now, well, I'll let you know that this picture was posted in January of 2020. This was posted on Twitter by the Washington State Department of Transportation. It was picked up by one of their roadside cameras, and if you look closely, you can see something right next to that tree that looks like a man walking in the snow. Now, the argument for this one has been that this is just a guy going for a hike. Now, it could be that, but I don't know a lot of people that would walk through the snow next to the highway. I mean, that's a good way to get lost and freeze to death. Coming in at number 6, we have Finding Bigfoot. This encounter got a ton of press. A guy in Michigan had a series of cameras set up on his massive property, and he picked up something very strange. The clip I'm going to show you is when the news covered it.
Back then, we couldn't show it. Now we can. A dark, hulking image amongst the trees that appeared in one frame.
And the popularity of this picture didn't stop there. It brought in people from the Animal Planet show Finding Bigfoot. They came down to investigate. They claimed that because of the location of the property, there could be a whole family of Bigfoot living out there. And when the Finding Bigfoot crew went through, they were unable to find hard evidence as to whether or not there was actually a Bigfoot on this man's property. But I feel like that's what Bigfoot is best at. He pops in for a few seconds, he makes you think that you're gonna find him, and then you come up empty-handed. Coming in at number 5, we have the Provo Canyon encounter. Okay, I will admit it, this one freaked me out a little bit. I don't know where I stand on Bigfoot. Like, maybe he's real. There's a time when people thought pandas were a myth, and the people who had said that they had seen one were laughed out of town. So we could have the same thing happening with Bigfoot. But whether you're a believer or not, this video might leave you with a few questions.
Yeah, we probably should be too close to it, huh? Cool.
Like, that did look pretty legit. We don't get a 100% clear shot, so maybe it was the real thing. The only thing I don't understand is why these guys are running towards it. Like, sure, you want to make the discovery of a lifetime. You want to change the world and reveal that you found the missing link. But at the same time, you don't want to end up beaten to a bloody pulp by a mythical beast. Coming in at number 4, we have the Paul Freeman footage. This is some of the most famous Bigfoot footage among Bigfoot truthers. Now, I gotta let you guys know that this clip is pulled from 1994, so this video is not gonna be in 4K. The whole video is about 7 minutes long, and it's Paul Freeman scaling out some Bigfoot tracks, showing how long their strides are and how big the footprints are. And then he sees this walking through the bush. Use clip 8.
Oh, there he goes.
Now, this is just a peek at what Freeman saw that day. He goes on to follow those Sasquatch for about 3 minutes, and later you can see that there are 2 smaller Sasquatches along with the larger one. It's thought that this is a mother with her 2 little ones. Now, it is kind of convenient that he was mapping out Bigfoot tracks and then runs into a Bigfoot, but people in the Bigfoot community say that this video is legit. Coming at number 3, we have Bigfoot in Russia. Man, Bigfoot is getting around to more countries than me, and this dude doesn't even have a passport. This footage was taken by a few kids that were walking around the frozen wilderness in Russia. They came across something that looked like giant footprints. It looked like someone was walking through and they sloshed around in the snow to make all their tracks look bigger. The kids were very curious, so they followed them, and guess what they found? Well, you don't have to guess, I'm going to show you. Use clip 5.
And darts away.
After they see the beast, they turn tail and run, and as I said in a previous point, that is the smart thing to do. And when they got home, they showed their parents. The clip became so popular that National Geographic went to go investigate. Coming in at number 2, we have the Allegheny camera trap. When people talk about Bigfoot, I always think, why don't they just set up a camera trap so they can get pictures of the big lug and then that'll be that? Well, it turns out that someone has actually done this. It was a photographer by the name of Rick Jacobs. He went up to the Allegheny National Forest, which is quite a trek north of Pittsburgh, and he set up some cameras to get some amazing nature footage. Well, he got something natural as well as something mythical. That photo, along with several others, were sent to the Denver Post to publish as proof of Bigfoot. The bummer is that we don't get to see his face, but I do have to say that this creature, whatever it is, doesn't look like a bear or something I've seen walking around in the woods. Its hair is too short. It definitely looks more like a primate. And coming in for the number 1 spot, we have Surprise. I really could title any of these Surprise. I don't think anyone has ever seen a Bigfoot and was like, oh, that's a regular creature that I've seen so many times before. I'm not shocked at all. But this guy in this next clip was just out hunting. He owns a big property in Mississippi, and while he was out looking for boar, he ran into this. The deeper and deeper I get into this, the more I become a believer. Now, in the description of this video, the person who posted it calls whatever this is a skunk ape, which is basically a southern Bigfoot. And this might be it. This has to be the most convincing video I have ever seen.
Number 10. How they live. In Washington state, a team of amateur Bigfoot researchers called the Olympic Project claimed to have discovered a collection of nests which belonged to Bigfoot. They had primatologists study them, with the conclusion being that they appear to have been created by a primate. There have been structures of broken and twisted foliage seemingly placed in specific areas, which have been attributed by some to Bigfoot behavior. In some reports, lodgepole pine and other small trees have been observed bent, uprooted, or stacked in patterns such as weaved and crisscrossed, leading to some to theorize that they are potential territorial markings. Some instances have included entire deer skeletons being suspended in high trees. Some Bigfoot researchers allege that Bigfoot throws rocks as territorial displays and for communication and audible blows struck against trees or wood knocking. Number 9. Where the species came from. Primatologist John R. Napier and anthropologist Gordon Strensenberg have suggested a species of Paranthropus as a possible candidate for the Bigfoot's identity, such as Paranthropus robutus with its gorilla-like crest skull and bipedal gait. Paranthropus is characterized by robust skulls with a prominent gorilla-like sagittal crest among the middle line, which suggests strong chewing muscles and broad herbivorous teeth used for grinding. Now, it's great that they believe this, but fossils of Paranthropus are found only in Africa, so it wouldn't really explain Bigfoot being in North America, but maybe it's something similar. Number 8. Research. Doing scientific research, Steve Moon, who has 3 MFAs and a master's in anthropology, has studied Bigfoot for the past 10 years, and he claims to have had at least 12 sightings. If you want credibility to build these theories, if you want to test, you want to actually discover things, then you've got to follow that method, he said. His ultimate goal is to prove Bigfoot's existence so the species may be appreciated and preserved. We all know that he exists, but now we need to find a way for science to accept the data, he said. While on a trail in the forest, Steve mimicked a Bigfoot's howl and he could hear a response. It was recorded and the recorder picked up a faint animal-like sound after his howl. Though it is almost inaudible, there is something there. Steve said, "I may have gotten a response. It's 2 seconds after my call ends. It's descending, followed by a percussive ascending note. If I were going to interpret this possible response, it sounds like a Sasquatch was offended by my call." Number 7. It's not just one species. Now, all around the world, people tell of mysterious beasts that are part human, part ape, typically large, hairy creatures that walk on 2 legs, but always seem to stay just out of sight. There isn't just a Bigfoot in North America, but there are other beasts as well. A yowie is found in Australia, particularly in the eastern part of the continent. There have been over 3,000 distinct yowie sightings that have been reported in the Blue Mountain area of west of Sydney. There's the Yeti, which is located in the Himalayas, which is also called the Abominable Snowman. The Orang Penyek is located in central Sumatra, Indonesia. Orang Penyek means a short person in Indonesian, which makes sense because it has a short stature and a human-like face. Local folklore says that these creatures walk with back-pointing feet to confuse anyone trying to track them. And finally, a chemosit is located in east central Kenyan forests. Some witnesses say that the chemosit looks like a hyena or bear and call it a Nandi bear after the Kenyan tribe that lives in its reported range. The Nandi people, however, consider the creature to be an enormous, ferocious primate that enjoys eating the brains of its victims. If there are so many creatures like this around the world, they have to exist then, right? Number 6. The theory. There have been many studies surrounding Bigfoot, and one study was conducted by John Napier and published in his book Bigfoot, the Yeti, and Sasquatch in Myth and Reality in 1973. John wrote that if a conclusion is to be reached based on scant extant hard evidence, science must declare Bigfoot does not exist. However, he found it difficult to entirely reject thousands of alleged tracks scattered over 125,000 square miles, or to dismiss all the many hundreds of eyewitnesses' accounts. John concluded, "I'm convinced that Sasquatch exists, but But whether it is all it's cracked up to be is another matter altogether. There must be something in the Northwest America that needs explaining, and that something leaves man-like footprints. Number 5. Recently spotted in Pennsylvania. The Bigfoot Field Organization, aka BFRO, has their own website filled with hundreds of stories of people spotting Bigfoot. On the website, a story was posted by a user saying, "On October 5th, 2022, while my boyfriend and I were biking on the ghost town trails near Ebensburg, Pennsylvania, we saw a Bigfoot coming about 150 yards in front of us. He was walking along the trail towards us. We couldn't see his face, but when he saw us, he turned around quickly and walked into the woods. As we went by, we looked into the woods and didn't see anything. It was really shocking as there were no sounds or smells. As he was walking, you could see how big his stride was, and there was a huge space between his legs. We thought this was a once-in-a-lifetime thing and thought it was so cool. Yes, Bigfoot does exist." And just in case you think the BFRO just took a submitted report, the site reported that it did a follow-up and spoke with the witnesses. It even names them on the site, and they found their testimony to be credible. The investigator who put it all together, Matthew Moneymaker, who was mentioned in part 1 of the series. If you haven't seen part 1 and part 2, check them out. Number 4. 3 photos of Bigfoot. A keen hunter once claimed to encounter Bigfoot and unveiled shocking photo proof to the world after setting up cameras outside his house. Craig Salk really loved hunting with his wife, and to increase the odds of their hunting success, Craig set up a number of trail cameras on his land. In 2012, one of his cameras snapped a mysterious figure that didn't appear to be animal or human. Luckily, Craig was a big fan of the show Finding Bigfoot on Animal Planet, and he knew exactly what he had to do. He reached out to the TV channel and showed the producers the image captured on his cameras. Animal Planet was massively impressed by the fact that Craig had managed to get 3 snaps of the mysterious creature and filmed an episode with him. After the episode aired, Craig was suddenly a star, and he was flooded with phone calls and visits from Americans who wanted to share their own bizarre paranormal experiences. Craig and his wife soon opened their land to the world to let anyone come out and examine the spot where Bigfoot was seen, take a look at the pictures, and judge for themselves. Number 3. First sighting ever. David Thompson was a surveyor and trader who worked for the Hudson's Bay Company and the Northwest Company. He was considered one of North America's great pathfinders and surveyors as he traveled through Western North America between 1785 and 1812. Once he saw Bigfoot and wrote in his journal of his finding while in Alberta, Canada. He wrote, "January 7th, 1811. Continuing on our journey in the afternoon, we came on the track of a large animal. The snow about 6 inches deep on the ice. I measured it, 4 large toes, each 4 inches in length, to each a short claw. The ball of the foot sunk 3 inches lower than the toes. The hinder part of the foot didn't mark well, the length 14 inches by 8 inches in breadth, walking from north to south, and having passed about 6 hours. As the snow was about 6 inches in depth, the track was well defined, and we could see it for a full 100 yards from us. This animal was proceeding north to south. We did not attempt to follow it, we had no time for it, and the hunters, eager as they are to follow and shoot every animal, made no attempt to follow this beast, for what could the balls of our fowling guns do against such an animal? Number 2. The Battle of Ape Canyon. The most successful launching pad for the public's obsession with Bigfoot is a battle that supposedly took place in a narrow gorge on the east flank of Mount St. Helens. The gorge is now called Ape Canyon. That's where, in the summer of 1924, a group of gold prospectors stumbled out of the woods shaking and glassy-eyed to tell of a 7-foot-tall ape-like animals attacking them with boulders. Fred Beck and 4 others described coming upon gorilla men near where they had built a small cabin. They saw 4 of the giant animals moving through the forest with erect, human-like strides. They were covered with long black hair, their ears were about 4 inches long and stuck straight up. They had 4 toes, short and stubby. The witnesses estimated each animal weighed around 400 pounds. Taken aback at the sight of the huge beasts, Fred fired his rifle at one of the creatures and struck 3 times, resulting in the wounded animal toppling off a cliff. This would be a mistake though, as that night the men were awakened when huge stones began hitting against their cabin. Then they heard and felt giant bodies slamming against the walls and door. The 8 men were seeking revenge and eventually tore a hole in the roof, allowing them to target Fred. Many of the rocks fell through the hole in the roof, and 2 of the rocks struck Fred, one of them rendering him unconscious for nearly 2 hours. hours. Then when the sun began to come up, the animals broke off their attack and slipped away. The men then poked their heads out the door, and when they decided the coast was clear, they ran out of the woods. And coming in at number 1, Bigfoot kidnapping. In 1924, Albert Ostman, a lumberjack and woodsman, went on vacation in the woods. Albert had heard stories about the man-beast who supposedly roamed these woods but refused to believe them. Then everything changed. One night when he was asleep, a Sasquatch picked him up and carried him off while he was in his sleeping bag. He was carried in a sleeping bag across the country for 3 hours by the Sasquatch. The Sasquatch then dropped Albert down on a plateau, and standing around him was a family of 4 of the creatures, 2 adults and 2 children. Albert claims he was kept captive by them for 6 days. One of the Bigfoots was reported as being 8 feet tall. Now, Albert had a gun, but he decided not to use it as they had done him no harm. He stayed with the Bigfoot family, stating he ate sweet-tasting grass that they gave him, and the female Sasquatch washed and stacked leaves. He escaped by making the large male Sasquatch groggy by feeding him some snuff. Albert did not tell his story for more than 24 years after it happened, in fear of being thought of as crazy. But as more Sasquatch stories appeared in the press, Albert decided to tell his story. Number 10. Joking about Bigfoot. In February of this year, a woman and her husband heard strange sounds for 2 nights and laughed about how they sounded like the Bigfoot sounds on television shows. That was their first mistake. Then on the 3rd night at dusk, they looked into the woods that bordered their property in Heflin, Alabama, and this is what happened. We saw what looked like Bigfoot peeking around a tree at us. We watched it for approximately 5 minutes as it appeared to look at us from the left and the right of the tree trunk. I dismissed it as being a distortion with the trees and wind. I turned to go into the house and looked back and distinctly saw what could have been only Bigfoot running away. I yelled for my husband and he also saw it running away. There was no mistaking what we saw. Both the husband and wife said the figure must have stood approximately 8 feet tall and its fur was very dark. Was Bigfoot spying on them? Who knows? Number 9. Side of a mountain. In December 2022, TikTok user Sasquatch Project, who claims to be connecting the cryptid community, posted a video of what appears to be Bigfoot. The text on the video reads, "Real giant caught on video in Mexico." The video shows what appears to be some sort of mountain or cave. There's a hole in the side of it and there's a large man looking out. He seems to be staring at the person recording and then backs up and goes back into the rocks. Many people in the comments made jokes, but a lot of them think it's real. One user commented, "What's going to be the government's excuse for this one? The video and the zoom is on point." Others are commenting that it's like the film The Hills Have Eyes, that it's a giant or Bigfoot, but who knows? Number 8. Bigfoot hiking. In 2001, a youth group was camping in the Marble Mountain Wilderness, California, when their leader, Jim Mills, noted a strange looking creature sulking along a ridge nearby. He believed it was Bigfoot and filmed it for nearly 7 minutes, making the somewhat grainy footage the longest video of an alleged Bigfoot sighting. The video shows Bigfoot walking down a hill. The creature is huge, it's dark in color, and is walking on 2 feet, but has somewhat of a strange stride. It's definitely not human, and no animal could appear like that, so the obvious answer is it's Bigfoot. But everyone in the video is shockingly calm though, which is crazy to me. Number 7. The footprint. In 1980, locals in Johnstown, Pennsylvania were baffled by a footprint they found. They first discovered the massive print in the mud and it belonged to somebody or something's right foot. Additionally, it had 6 toes rather than 5, and the second imprint of the left foot was found 8 feet away from the right print. It was so big and they measured it, finding it was 17.75 inches long. Now, this didn't spook too many people though, because according to the Associated Press, the footprint coincided with reports of strange noises and a strong but unusual odor in the area. Again, I love how everyone was just so chill about this. Number 6. Bigfoot crossing the road. This story is from a man in Canada. He said, "I was going moose hunting and my friend was driving and we had been on the road about 9 to 10 hours going to Ignis, Ontario, and we were on the Trans-Canada Highway. This area has the bush cut back some 30 to 40 years on each side of the road when I noticed an animal coming out of the north side of a ditch area and run across a 2-lane highway. This animal ran across the road on 2 legs and was about 20 yards away. By the time it crossed the road, my friend turned to me and said, "What the hell was that?" I said, "Don't you know that was a Sasquatch / a Bigfoot." It was about 6 to 7 feet tall. It had very long and muscular arms that went down to its knees. It was covered in fur that reminded me of moose hair. It looked like it was as tall or a little bit taller than the cab of the truck. It only took about 5 or 6 steps across the 2-lane highway and down to the ditch we were passing. I think it's a female because of breasts that were in the lower chest area, heavy legs and buttocks, about 300 to 400 pounds. It had less hair on the chest area and a partially covered homid face that I could see muscle definition on the arms and shoulders. Number 5. Tracks in BC. This story comes from a group of people from British Columbia in December 2022. We were returning home last night and 2 members in our vehicle said, "Look, is that a bear?" The person in the front seat saw what looked like a huge man standing on 2 legs. It bent over and fell to 4 legs. The person in the back saw the animal on the 4 legs. They both said it was not a bear. We live nearby, so when we got home, all 4 of us decided to go back and look for tracks. We went and filmed and took photos of a whole bunch of massive tracks that looked like they were from a biped animal. The tracks were bipedal in pattern and in a fairly straight line, except at points where they were side by side as if the creature was stopping and standing still. We have also been walking in the woods near our house, and one time I saw a structure / setup of trees that looked deliberately placed in different crisscross arrangements. I also heard deep resonant sounds one night. It sounded part human, part animal. The Ohio howl matched exactly what she heard right outside her cabin, only a few hundred feet from where the sighting was. Number 4. Family witness. In 1996, this family saw Bigfoot. This user says, "My 2 daughters and I were driving into Yakima from our home in Natchez. The road runs along the Natchez River, and I looked down at the river, as I always do, to see deer or bald eagles. But this time, I saw a large dark figure at the edge of the water behind some bushes. Slamming on my brakes and backing up far enough to see the river again, the large figure was gone and nowhere to be seen. Of course, my kids said, 'Sure, Mom. Bigfoot? I don't think so.' About 2 weeks later, I was driving on the same road coming home, and about half a mile from where I thought I had seen the other one, there were 2 standing side by side just looking down at the water. One was about 1.5 feet taller than the other, both dark in color with very wide shoulders. Then about a week later, my husband was coming home. When he got home, he asked me where I thought I had seen the 2 Bigfoot. I told him, and he said that he had just seen something like I saw in the same area. He's a real skeptic, so for him to say he saw something, he must have. I look every day, and so far I have not seen my friends down by the water, but I won't give up looking. Number 3. Creature Week sighting. I was a vendor at Creature Week at Salt Fork State Park on May 4th in 2013. At 9:45 p.m., a fisherman that was in a tournament came all shook up and said, "At first I thought you were a bunch of nuts until now." He said he saw Bigfoot. This caught our attention, and the 5 of us decided to go out the next morning at 6 a.m. to check out the site. So I got there at 5 a.m. and waited, so I said I'll start without them and maybe they'll catch up with me. I started to head down the sagebrush trail and headed to where the fishermen saw them. I kept walking, and when I hit the first turn of the sagebrush trail, I heard something like talking on the ridge on my left. At first I thought it was friend A and friend B with friend A's black shirts on. So I hit a tree and yelled, "Hey guys, wait up." Then they started to walk faster and I yelled, "Very funny guys," and this is when I got a great look at them. It was 2 Bigfoots and they were black and huge. I tried to catch up with them, but once they got to the bottom of the ridge, they took off into the brush. I tried to follow them, but once they got into the brush, I could not hear or see them. But I got a great look at them. They were black as coal and the hair length was as long as a bear and well groomed. At any time they could have stopped and tore me in half, but all they wanted to do was get away as fast as possible. Number 2. Bigfoot on a highway. This family has seen Bigfoot and the wife retold the story, saying, "In October 1997, I was returning home from work on the US Highway 241 just outside Gladstone, Michigan. I got off work at 5, picked up my kids, and my son was in the front seat with me and my daughters were in the back. We had just left Gladstone city limits on a 4-lane highway when I noticed what I thought was a hunter crouched down on the opposite side of the median of the highway. As I approached, I said to my son, 'Look at that stupid hunter, why is he just sitting there?' But as we got closer to the man, or now I say creature, stood up. It was brown colored and it crossed the highway with a couple of steps as it was on the other side of the highway within seconds. As I passed, it put its arms down to its side and stepped into the woods and it was gone. I have seen bears, deer, wolves, coyotes, almost every living creature here. My mind raced after I saw this, looking for the logical answer of what this could be, and the only thing it could have been was a Bigfoot. Then 2 days later, after I saw the creature, it was reported on the local radio station that a Bigfoot was spotted on the same highway. And coming up at number 1 is the Cottage Bigfoot. This dad saw Bigfoot when his family was away at their cottage. He said, "We had been at the cottage for a few days when my sons and I heard a series of grunts, chirps, and squeals. It was fairly obvious that the sounds were coming from 2 areas about 15 degrees apart. There was also the noise of wood breaking and banging that was quite loud. We stepped out onto the deck to listen better. It was fairly obvious that one noise was getting closer to the other. The noises were really loud and it sounded like mayhem was breaking loose, trees being smacked and banging noises, shouts, and whoops. Then it went quiet really quickly, which was followed by a series of deep whooping noises and clicks, which went on intermittently past the point I went to sleep. The next day I saw this big black brown thing sitting on a boulder about 20 feet above the water. I thought at first it was a bear, but when a bear sits, its legs just stick out in front, slightly splayed. The thing had knees and it was sitting with its knees up near its chest. I was not sure of what I was seeing, so I looked away and went back at it. I was not mistaken, it had knees and was covered in hair with no neck, and then slapped its hands on the rock about 3 times, both hands at the same time. It looked kinda straggly and matted. It was huge on top like the chest area, but it had scrawny by comparison legs. The hair on its legs were thinner and lighter. Then the thing just stood up and walked into the brush behind it. Seems like Bigfoot was just trying to enjoy the view of the lake to me."
Number 10. Amazon Tools. The Amazon rainforest is home to many unique and dangerous creatures, as well as unsolved mysteries and lost civilizations. But did you know that the Amazon was actually once home to giants? At least this evidence discovered in 2012 seems to point to that being the truth. A group of Ecuadorian researchers ventured into the thick forest in order to follow ancient legends of a city of giants, and they actually found it. They found massive stone structures and even a large pyramid, the stones being so precisely cut and arranged that it could not have been just formed by the forces of nature. Within these structures, they also found massive stone tools that were too large for any normal-sized human to use, including hammers and chisels and other building tools. While some people do still chalk it up to natural formations, the team and many others stand by their belief that this city was once home to a race of giants. Number 9. Giant skeleton. In 1890 in France, a man named Georges Vacher made a skeletal discovery in a Bronze Age cemetery in Castelnau. 3 separate bone fragments were found that came from both the arm and the leg, or humerus and tibia bones for all the scientists out there. The bones seem to date back to the Neolithic era, which was around 10,000 to 4,000 BC, and they are thought to be evidence of one of the largest human beings ever. The man who discovered them used the size of the bone fragments to estimate the total size of the person, which would have been around 11.5 feet tall. In 1892, the bones were sent to a university in France to be carefully studied by a professor of pathological anatomy, him admitting that the bones represented a quote, very tall race. A few years later, giant skulls were found in another French cemetery and also sent away for even more study. Number 8. Bigfoot. The first discovery of Sasquatch or Bigfoot footprints goes all the way back to the year 1811. Since then, there have been countless reports of Bigfoot sightings and encounters, and with the invention of photo and video cameras came massive amounts of apparent real footage of Bigfoot. Bigfoot is most often described as being a giant humanoid creature around 15 feet tall who tends to hang out in the woods and ignore fabricated mating calls from Bigfoot hunters on their television shows. These sightings also span all the way across the entire world, each country and culture having their own representation and name for the mysterious creature. From the Russian Yeti to the Australian Yowie, they're apparently everywhere. So while many photos and recordings of Bigfoot have been debunked, there are many people who truly believe the Bigfoot is real, and who's to say they couldn't potentially be a long-lost race of giants who had to move into the woods as society evolved. Number 7. West Virginia giants. The giant skeletons discovered in France aren't the only reports of giant remains being found. They have also been found in American soil, specifically in West Virginia. In 1774, a man named Jack Parsons was walking along a flooded river when he saw a bone sticking out of the ground, and like any normal person would do, he pulled it out, discovering it was a femur, but it was almost twice the size of his own. Alongside it, he found more bones and discovered a skeleton that was around 8 feet tall. In 1838, excavators found even more remains that were also much taller than the average person. In the 1850s, even more were found, though they soon went missing and were thought to have been stolen and sold. Over the years, even more remains were found in the late 1800s, one skeleton even being over 10 feet tall. The Giant Town and other places across West Virginia have even more stories of discoveries of this race of giants. Number 6. Robert Walow. Arguably the most famous real giant who you've probably heard of before is a man who was named Robert Walow. If you have read the Guinness Book of World Records or visited one of their walkthrough museums, you have probably seen his picture or stood next to his giant life-size statue. And yes, this guy was actually real, and he was actually that tall. He was just brushing 9 feet tall at the time of his death in the summer of 1940. He was born in 1918, and at the time, no one knew just how tall he was going to be, as he was an average-sized baby weighing 8.7 pounds, which is less than I weighed when I was born, but to be fair, I was a big baby. He then quickly started to shoot up, and by the time he was 8 years old, he was almost 6 feet tall. For reference, the average 8-year-old is usually around 4 feet tall. He became a celebrity for his height, starring in the circus and doing a promotional tour for a shoe company. Unfortunately, his gigantism led to numerous medical issues, and he died at the age of only 22. Number 5. Greek mythology. Now let's turn around and take a look back at some more theoretical proof of giants. Some famous giants from different cultures and legends. I know you may not think of this as real evidence, but I just love digging into these myths and depictions, and if so many different cultures across the world are writing about giants, this could be evidence that they're real, right? So let's start with the Greeks. Atlas was the name of a titan that went to war against Olympus. As we know, the Titans lost, and Atlas was cursed to hold up the sky for the rest of eternity. Atlas also had a run-in with Perseus, who was a slayer of monsters. Atlas tried to scare Perseus away, and in response, Perseus took Medusa's head out of his bag and turned Atlas to stone, creating the range that is now known as the Atlas Mountains. But hey, at least he doesn't have to hold up the sky anymore. Number 4. Irish giants. Irish mythology believes that a race of giants known as the Fomorians were actually the original settlers of Ireland. Balor was the king of these one-eyed giants and was also the god of death. It was said that anyone who looked at him would die instantly. Because of this, he constantly kept his eye closed until it was absolutely necessary. A prophecy said that he would be killed by his own grandson, so he locked his daughter away to prevent her from having any children. But this didn't work, as a minor god snuck in and got comfortable with his daughter, and they loved each other very much, and she had 3 kids. But Balor was still thinking with his head, and so he threw all 3 kids into the ocean. Problem solved, right? Wrong. One of the sons survived and was raised by the god of the sea. The kid grew up, led a bunch of Irish gods into battle, and he killed Balor by ripping out his eye. Goodbye, King of Giants, you really tried your best. Number 3. The Bible. When you think of giants in the Bible, you may think of the story of Goliath, a giant who was defeated by a regular-sized shepherd named David. Goliath was a champion from the city of Gath, which is a place where a race of giants apparently originated from. His exact size is up in the air, but many people believe he was around 9'7" and wore a large amount of bronze armor. And here's how the story goes. David goes out out to face Goliath, holding the fate of his people in his hands. So of course he's armed with a very menacing weapon, a slingshot. David uses his trusty slingshot to fire a rock, which hits Goliath right between his eyes, and Goliath falls down and dies immediately. Pretty good shot. David and Goliath has become an infamous story for representing the underdog, though my personal favorite story about underdogs is the movie Underdog, released in 2007. Number 2, Gog Magog. If you know me, then you know I'm constantly looking for names to name my future children, and this one is definitely a strong contender. Gog Magog is the name of the last British giant. A Welshman wrote a book about how early Britain was inhabited by a race of giants. One of them being Gog Magog, 12 feet tall and able to easily uproot an oak tree. One day the giants attacked Brutus, descendant of the Trojans, and all the giants were killed except for good old Goggy. Brutus took Gog Magog to his second in command, who was apparently super into giant wrestling. The two wrestled and Gog Magog was going pretty ham and crushed a few of the guy's ribs, but this didn't kill the guy and instead just made him super angry. Fueled by his rage, the man was able to pick up Gog Magog, carry him up a hill, toss him off a cliff to his death, ridding the world of Britain's last giant. Rest in peace, Gog Magog. Number 1, Hrungnir. Giants exist all over Norse mythology, but the one that is known as the biggest and baddest is called Hrungnir. One day, Odin, the leader of the Norse gods of Asgard, challenged the giant to a horse race, which turns out to be a little unfair when you take into account the fact that Odin was riding his magical 6-legged horse and Hrungnir just had a normal horse. He of course lost, and Odin at least felt a little bad about it, so he invited the giant back to Asgard for a drink. Like me, he couldn't handle his alcohol and started getting a little rowdy, saying that he would kill all of the gods of Asgard except for 2 goddesses, which he would bring back with him to the realm of the giants. The Asgardians were like, hey bro, that's kinda not cool, and told Thor to come deal with this clown. So the two met for battle, Hrungnir wearing stone armor and with a massive stone as his weapon. Thor picked up his magical hammer Mjolnir and it broke through both the stone and Hrungnir's face, killing him. I'm noticing a pattern in these stories that the giant always ends up dying, and probably why they're not around today.
So starting us off at number 10, cover-ups. So this might not be news in regards to the idea of alien life and the government's involvement, as it's long been theorized by believers that the government has been covering up truths in relation to ETs and UFOs. But if we are to believe what was said in Congress, then that means the theory wasn't wrong. A former intelligence official testified last Wednesday that the United States government has found and covered up evidence of extraterrestrial life for decades. One of the witnesses, retired Major David Grush, alleged at a House of Representatives hearing about UFOs that the Pentagon has recovered crashed vehicles and biological remains believed to be of non-human origin. Quote, I was informed in the course of my official duties of a multi-decade UAP crash retrieval and reverse engineering program to which I was denied access. My testimony is based on information I have been given by individuals with a long-standing track record of legitimacy and service to this country, many of whom also shared compelling evidence in the form of photography, official documentation, and classified oral testimony. So yeah, and it only gets crazier from here. Moving on to number 9, caught on video. Now, as I mentioned, there were 3 military veterans that were a part of this hearing. We touched on David Grush in the last point, but the other 2 witnesses, Ryan Graves, Executive Director of Americans for Safe Aerospace, and retired Navy Commander David Fravor, both testified they too had personal experiences with UFOs while on the job. One of the more shocking incidents in particular detailed by Fravor was an incident from 2004, where a UAP was caught on video. Now, UFOs, or UAPs as they're formally referred to by military personnel, are defined as any object that is detected but cannot be immediately explained. And while some end up having innocent explanations like being weather balloons or drones, others remain quite the mystery. The 2004 incident falls into the latter category. Fravor said it was several years before any officials followed up on the extraordinary events headlines of the day, and even then, he added that nothing was done. Moving on to number 8. There's a support group. Obviously, there was a lot of juicy information being revealed at the hearing, and I don't know if this was news to everyone, but it was to me, so I'm adding it. The former Navy pilot Ryan Graves talked about how he had founded the Americans for Safe Aerospace group that supports aviators who have reported UAPs, which might not sound like the craziest thing compared to what else was revealed. I mean, there are support groups for tons of different things, but to think that people are likely to require support after coming forward with unexplainable sightings is kind of crazy. Like, what is happening after they submit this report? What did they see? What did their superiors do to them? Graves stated that the objects that are reportedly being seen by military and commercial pilots are, quote, performing maneuvers that are unexplainable due to our current understanding of our technology and our capabilities as a country. Further adding, quote, if everyone could see the sensor and video data I witnessed, our national conversation would change. Moving on to number 7, fear of coming forward. So branching off of my last point, during the hearing, much of the discussion centered on improving the process for reporting unidentified aerial phenomena, or UAPs, but Grush was also there to promote removing the stigma for aviators who report UAP sightings and to ensure oversight of government programs that investigate them. The former intelligence officer told the panel that he and several other colleagues have been the targets of what he calls administrative terrorism, and that he has at times feared for his life since coming forward. Which, I mean, would make a lot of sense if that's true, why a support group was put in place for those who report UAPs. Quote, it was very brutal and very unfortunate. Some of the tactics they used to hurt me both professionally and personally, he said, adding that there is currently an open investigation into the matter. Moving on to number 6. Safety issues. One of the major arguments this hearing was intending to focus on was that in not reporting or in discouraging reports, we are creating a national safety issue. And there is a push for intelligence agencies to be more transparent about UAPs in order to promote national safety. Supporters of this, like Democratic Rep. Robert Garcia of California, said, quote, UAPs, whatever they may be, may pose a serious threat to our military and our civilian aircraft, and that must be understood. We should encourage more reporting, not less, on UAPs. The more we understand, the safer we will be. Grush, Graves, and Fravor all echoed similar sentiments, explaining they would like to see a, quote, safe and transparent reporting system. The men added that they are hopeful the public discourse is the first step towards eliminating the stigma and reports of UAPs to encourage others to come forward. Moving on to number 5. People have been hurt. So according to Grush, not only have there been some pretty sneaky cover-ups as well as some shady treatment to those who come forward, but people have also been harmed and threatened in order to not reveal information. Grush details that as a former intelligence officer, he would go to jail for revealing classified information, but when he was asked whether anyone had been harmed or injured to cover up information about extraterrestrial technology, he answered yes. Now, that alone is scary enough, but even more wild is that when he was asked if anyone had been killed, he said he had, quote, directed people with that knowledge to the appropriate authorities. Now, I get it. He can't say yes or no because it's classified and all, but that's kind of a creepy answer. Feels like he's trying to tell us yes without telling us that. Now, on the other hand, a spokesperson for the Pentagon, Sue Gao, told NBC News that Grush's claims are false, but I mean, I don't know, man. What do you guys think? Coming in at number 4. Sightings are not rare. According to former Navy pilot and executive director of Americans for Safe Aerospace, Ryan Graves, it wasn't just the 2004 incident that raised some eyebrows. Graves also talked about an incident with a flying object off the coast of Virginia Beach in 2014. He said that while flying an F-18, he came across an aircraft that looked like a, quote, dark gray or black cube inside of a clear sphere. year, which sounds pretty UFO-y if you ask me. Graves estimated the aircraft to be 5 to 15 feet in diameter and unlike any aircraft he has ever seen. But even more peculiar than its shape was that Graves claimed the UAP could remain stationary despite hurricane force winds. And according to Graves, sightings like this one are not rare, are not isolated. Plus, he explained that his squadron submitted a safety report at the time, but that he received no official acknowledgement of the incident. Moving on to number 3. A very small amount get reported. Now, despite the fact that Graves claims sightings are not rare, and the fact that it feels like there is always a new UFO sighting popping up, officially speaking, there are apparently not very many sightings that actually get officially reported. Graves estimates that roughly 5% of UAP sightings are reported. Again, mostly due to stigma. Quote, "I urge us to put aside stigma and address the security and safety issues this topic represents. If UAP are foreign drones, it is an urgent national security problem. If it is something else, it is an issue for science. In either case, unidentified objects are a concern for flight safety. The American people deserve to know what is happening in our skies. It is long overdue." So hopefully this whole situation means more sightings will be reported following the hearing. I guess we will have to wait and see. Moving on to number 2, they really are more advanced. Back to retired Navy Commander David Fravor. I touched a bit in a previous point about his 2004 video he captured, but we're actually gonna circle back because there is a little more. Not only was this small tic-tac shaped flying object flabbergasting because they didn't know what it was, but according to Fravor, quote, "There were no rotors, no rotor wash, or any visible flight control surfaces like wings." Plus, Fravor explained that as he and the other pilots tried to get closer to the mysterious craft, quote, "It rapidly accelerated and disappeared right in front of our aircraft, leaving behind no detectable turbulence." Which essentially means whatever it was and whoever created it has far more access to superior technology than we do here on Earth. Fravor said, quote, "I'm not a UFO fanatic, but what we saw with our 4 sets of eyes, we have nothing close to it. It was incredible technology." Similarly, Grush alleged at another time that the military had misused funds allocated for other programs to try to reverse engineer some of the supposedly non-human technology. And last up in our number 1 spot, there are still unanswered questions. While there was certainly some juicy deets revealed at the hearing, we were also left with even more questions and still a few skeptics. Representative Eric Burleson of Missouri said he found it far-fetched that an extraterrestrial species was technologically advanced enough to travel to Earth, yet is, quote, "somehow incompetent enough to survive Earth and crash." NASA also weighed in, saying that scientists have been searching for signs of life in our universe for years, but they have so far come up short. The space agency's missions have studied water on Mars, explored the ocean worlds, Titan and Europa, and looked for molecules that could be a sign of life in the atmospheres of alien planets, but claim that our understanding of life is still a bit fuzzy and ever-changing. Now, all of that being said, as per the Planetary Society, it is, quote, "very unlikely that Earth is the only home to intelligent life." So, we may be onto something here. I guess we'll just have to wait and see until more information is revealed.
Scene script. Want more videos like this one? Then you have to check out this series next. It's about the real-life Bigfoot again, but it's actually part 1 of the series that you missed. So get caught up and we'll catch you guys in that previous video. Bye!